Boom, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the Nolan Hawkeye Anthony YouTube channel, and I thank all of you for being here wherever you may be, and of course, however you may be listening. Well, the Iowa Hawkeyes did just officially shellac the Wisconsin Badgers on the road on homecoming night, which, you know, if you really think about it, like all the external stuff really was in the favor of Wisconsin Badgers. You know, you would think that they were totally hyped for this game, which they probably were. They just were not up to the task. I mean, this Iowa, the last 5 years, has dominated this series, and it's really a stark contrast from the turning point between the two programs in the, you know, between, I would say, maybe 2005 to 2000, well, let's just go 2010 to 2009 to, you know, early 2020s. You know, Wisconsin really was dominant in that time. And, you know, with the exception of maybe a few years here or there, you know, 2015, Iowa notably won on the road early in the morning and got that victory with C.J. Beathard. But Wisconsin really did have Kirk Ferentz's number, you know, Paul Chryst. I mean, and so right now we're seeing the opposite of that. You know, Iowa really put an emphasis on winning the rivalry games, and for what it's worth, they've done a great job. I know they've lost to Iowa State 2 years in a row, but if you look at the last, you know, 8 years, Iowa has done a pretty good job winning the rivalry games. I mean, this was just an absolute shellacking. I predicted Iowa would win this game by 10 points. I was not predicting this. But Iowa just controlled the game from beginning to end. You know, the defense played lights out. For what it's worth, I think Wisconsin's offense is terrible. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a run game. They don't have an offensive line. They don't have playmakers. I mean, it's just, you know, atrocious all the way around. Wisconsin, quite frankly, their offense is, looking like Iowa's under Brian Ferentz. So, man, it's really bothering me now. Now I want to look up, you know, the Iowa versus Wisconsin series and take a look at that really quickly. But I digress. Iowa's defense just played phenomenal. You know, they shut down the run. Wisconsin on the day. Let me get the team stats. By the way, guys, I actually recorded this on my other camera, but sometimes my internet is absolutely terrible. And what happens is, you know, I start recording and then, you know, Zoom will go out and then I have to start recording again. And then I'm going to have to, you know, cut up all the videos and compress them together. And it's like, you know, at some point I just got to cut my losses and record on my phone. But so, you know, I'm saying that to say I was trying to share my screen with you guys so you guys could see this too and follow along. But unfortunately, just couldn't make that happen today. But Wisconsin had 127 yards on the ground. Actually a little bit better than I thought. Not superb, but a little bit better. I mean, really what it was is Iowa shut down Wisconsin's pass game. I mean, they had under 100 yards, 82 yards to be exact, and only 12 first downs. Now, Iowa only had 19, but still, I mean, the defense played lights out. To give up 0 points against a Big Ten team, a rival on the road, is phenomenal. As far as the offense goes, just to keep this video as you know, short as possible, short and sweet as possible. Gronowski, good to see him. You know, he missed some passes, but for the most, and he had an interception. But for the most part, he was pretty efficient. You know, he made the makeable plays for the more often than not. You know, you look at Wisconsin and it's like, ugh, it could always be worse. You know, he still did have only 107 yards. And, you know, when I was recording this before, I was saying, for what it's worth, and I don't want to be, you know, that one person when Iowa wins 37-0, but you guys know, I always say, I'm going to be honest. At the end of the day, my sole concern is that Iowa wins as many games as possible. And, if there's something that is not occurring or occurring that is not helping that, then I'm going to point it out. And as far as the passing game goes, I thought it would be a little bit further along at this point. And when I say further along, what I mean is like, averaging in the upper 100s to, low 200s yards per game passing. And we're just not there yet. The passing game, if you look at the 2 years, it really is moving forward in like small areas, small points. If you look at the numbers as a whole, this year probably is at this point not that much better than last year. But as a fan, looking at the offense is moving relatively efficiently. It hasn't been perfect, but it is moving much more efficiently than the Brian Ferentz era, and I would say a little bit more efficient than last year. And part of that is the pass game. Part of that is Gronowski. The passing attack is a little bit more efficient. The completion percentage is a little bit better. But as far as the big plays, the being explosive in the pass game, it's just not quite there yet. Part of that is not having a tight end like Iowa has had in years past that's a massive receiving threat. Part of it is Reese Vanderzee being out and Iowa not having a big-bodied wide receiver. Part of it is not having somebody that's like an Amir Smith-Marset. I would say maybe Caden Weejian could be that guy, and I wish Iowa tried to, but for what it's worth, they did try and get him involved today, but over the course of the last 2 years, maybe they could have gotten him a little bit more involved. But it's moving forward in small doses in a better direction. But it's not far and away better than what we saw in the Brian Ferentz days. It's just not. It's not, especially when you consider that Iowa upgraded at quarterback. They went out and got, and paid for a quarterback, and but with all of that said, again, it is somewhat better in small areas. And if I look at Gronowski's performance in this game, he did what he needed to do. The one INT wasn't great. He missed 2 passes, one to Vaname along the sideline in the first or second quarter. He was wide open, 5 yards beyond the sticks, just absolutely overthrew it. And then the other one that comes to mind, even though I think there was 1 or 2 more, was a rollout. He slipped. There was a Wisconsin defender right in front of him. He had to make a play. He actually made a really nice throw considering it had to be a quick play, quick pass, and he was literally coming off of tripping. But again, he tripped. That's... You have to find a way to not have that happen. I know that stuff does happen sometimes, but again, it's a missed opportunity because Hayden Large did have a step on the receiver, and the ball was a little bit overthrown. Him slipping did obviously affect the pass. So if I had to give him a grade for today, I'd probably give him a B- if I take into consideration that he's coming off an injury. And again, guys, a big aspect of Gronowski's game is being able to run. Okay, he's not a bad pocket passer, but he's also not great. I wouldn't put him, if you look at Iowa quarterbacks, I would not put him at the level of a, C.J. Beathard or Nate Stanley. Combined of all the skills, he might be approaching that level, but just purely from a, passing perspective, he's not at their level. He's not bad, but he's not at their level. And so a massively critical aspect of his game is being able to make plays on the ground. If you go back and you look at his South Dakota State highlights, a massive portion of his big plays were on the ground. And so the fact that, he's injured definitely plays a factor in his production. So hopefully he can continue to get healthy. Iowa's definitely going to need him to get healthy, especially if they want this offense to, keep taking steps forward and, become more explosive as the season goes on. If I were to not take his injury into account, maybe a C plus, but that's where I'm at for him. So it was good to see Jeremy Hecklinski again. Going into next year, Iowa's going to have an open competition unless they decide to go get another day one starting quarterback in their eyes, like a Gronowski or, at the time, the Cade McNamara days. But if they don't decide to do that, it's gonna be an open competition. It's going to be an open competition. And, hell, I would even say even if they do go get a decent quarterback in the portal, it'll still probably be an open competition. The only way it won't be is if it's like they're able to land like a guaranteed, this guy's going to be the starter. That's what we're paying him for, at the very least the first couple of weeks of the season. So it was good to see Hecklinski. And I like that Tim Lester does that because it's not necessarily a message against Hank Brown. It's a message that, hey, I want to see what both these guys can do. We gave Hank Brown an opportunity in a big moment the game before, but in a game that, there's not as much on the line. It's a few snaps. Let's go ahead and put Jeremy Hecklinski out there and give him some run, which is fine. Now, on one hand, you could make the case, though, that whatever person you kind of are leaning towards being the replacement, you want to give a bulk of the snaps to them in order to continue to have them develop as quickly as possible for next year. But again, it's not very many snaps, and I overall, I think it was good that they decided to go with Hecklinski. Running, Kamari Moulton had 96 yards, just under 100. He probably could have gotten 100 if Iowa really was trying to get there. 1 touchdown, excellent game from Kamari Moulton. He also had 3 receptions for 29 yards. Xavier Williams, 7 for 55, 7.9 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns. Kamari Moulton averaged 6.4 a pop. Xavier Williams, I really think that this guy can be an NFL running back. He has way more wiggle, way more explosiveness, way more agility than people give him credit for. Nathan McNeil continues to look great as a freshman. I continue to be vindicated when I said when Iowa landed him that this was a massively under-the-radar get, and I'm very grateful that they found him, and that was as I've said before, the final parting gift of Liddell Betts was landing Nathan McNeil. Reese Vanderzee, good to see him back. He had 3 receptions for 29 yards. Iowa's really going to need him moving forward. He adds an element that Iowa just doesn't have. He is the best big-bodied receiver that Iowa has, and quite frankly, from a pure talent standpoint, he might be the best wide receiver that Iowa has, period. I do like the upside of Dayton Howard. He's just not quite there yet. Maybe next year he'll really take a step forward. Maybe towards the end of the year he might take some big steps forward. But as of now, it's baby steps, which is fine. It was good to see DJ Vaname get a few receptions. I like that Iowa's going to him. He looks like he's developing into a more receiving threat for the Iowa Hawkeyes as a tight end, which is good. Don't know what happened to the other tight end that Iowa has. Zach Ortworth. Sorry, guys. It's so many names to remember, but, still. Defense, it was good to see Jaden Montgomery out there playing against his home state. He is from Green Bay. He was a guy that Iowa landed. He was the final recruiting class in the COOF era. And Iowa at the time really was struggling to gain any sort of momentum on the recruiting trail. Because again, as I've said a million times, when it comes to recruiting, and specifically schools like Iowa, and every school really, they break it up into a, kind of like a cyclical manner. And they expect to be at a certain point when it comes to building a relationship with a recruit by such and such a time. And so if you can't get, you know, the recruits on campus and you can't start fostering those relationships, you know, Kirk Ferentz was notoriously cited as saying, we thought we'd be further along, and usually we would be further along. So anyways, at the time, Iowa needed to just get a commitment. They had the connection with his dad. I can't remember what the connection is, whether he's a former coach or whether he played for Iowa. No, his dad was a 3-year starter. He was a legacy recruit. So it was good to see him get his first start against his home state team. You know, it's always good. Iowa always has these stories, and it's good to see it nowadays, especially with NIL and things like that. But it always seems to be at the linebacker position. And hell, all three guys, it's the story with Carson Scherer, with Jaden Harrell. You know, we'll see what happens with Jaden Harrell. Hopefully he's not out for too much longer. But Jaden Montgomery, all three of these guys, their story is that they stuck it out. They didn't transfer. They continued to develop. They continued to contribute on special teams. And they have, you know, been able to see their hard work pay off in their final season as Iowa Hawkeyes. I don't know if Jaden Harrell, you know, if he has like a season-ending injury, if he would be eligible for a medical injury or medical red shirt. I'm sure he would, but we'll have to wait and see what the update is with him. Alex Mata, good to see him get some run on the defense too. He's a converted wide receiver. Good to see Drew Stevens get back on track. He was 3 for 3 with a long of 49. Reese Dakin averaged 38.8 on 4 punts. You know, obviously not his biggest day, but it also depends on the field position when you do have to punt. He did down 2 inside the 20. So what does this mean? Well, first and foremost, Iowa gets a victory. They're 4-2 overall, with 2 losses coming against ranked teams. You know, and as I said coming into this game, both of these teams didn't have a bad loss. Albeit Iowa's was a little bit better, as you know, their 2 losses were close games, and you could even argue that they should have won both games. And you know, now that Iowa is 4-2, it really is difficult to look back at those. It's even more so difficult to look back at those 2 losses because they really were so winnable, and Iowa could really just as easily be sitting here 6-0, ranked inside the top 15, because as I said when they lost to Indiana, they are a really talented team. And I still believe that they are a really talented team, but we just need to see it put into, you know, evidence and actuality. And so I think this was the biggest game that we've seen that be the case. Now, granted, again, Wisconsin doesn't seem to be a very good team. I'm mostly saying this not on regarding the quality of an opponent Wisconsin is, but given that it was a rivalry game on the road, night game, homecoming, you know, this was had all the makings of a trap game, and Iowa did what they needed to do, moved to 2-1 in the Big Ten and 4-2 overall. But again, it really is rough that they're not sitting here 5-1 or 6-0, because they absolutely could be. And I think that they do have a top 25 quality level of talent across the roster. So, you know, but as far as this win goes, it's always nice to beat a rival. It's always nice to beat that ASS and do it soundly and resoundingly, and you know, without quarrel or you know, trepidation. But you know, get one of these bad boys right here. I literally bought these for this very moment. All of that is nice, you know, but how good of a team is Wisconsin? Who knows? By the way, guys, Iowa State has lost 2 in a row. They lost to Cincinnati, and they did lose to Colorado. It looks like earlier today. So they sit at 5-2. Iowa 4-2. They probably have a bye. Iowa State probably has a bye week. So that loss is actually not looking as good as it once did. Iowa State will likely drop out of the top 25 as Colorado was I think 2-4 going into this game. And so yeah, it's but still, like I said, they could have worse losses, and this is why I don't like that Iowa plays Iowa State every year. I know Iowa fans disagree with me, but I just don't really see a ton of upside for Iowa playing Iowa State because people, no matter how good Iowa State becomes, people see Iowa as the big brother school, and they expect Iowa to beat them. And so when Iowa does beat Iowa State, there's not as much cachet or upside. But when Iowa State beats Iowa, it's like, oh, watch out for Iowa State, especially nowadays. So, as far as this win goes, just to keep it focused, it's hard to say how, Wisconsin doesn't seem to be very quality, which, by the way, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Luke Fickell. I remember listening to the thoughts of, the Wisconsin faithful, the podcasters last year in lieu of their loss to Iowa, and they were talking about him being fired last year. But the problem is it was too early, and they owe him too much money. And things don't really seem to be getting better. They actually seem to be getting worse in a lot of regards. But that's a side note. I'm not a Wisconsin fan, but it is worth saying. So Iowa did what they were supposed to do. They were the better team. They got back on track, and they won a rivalry game. There's some positive. The defense played great. I highlighted all those things already. The run game looked phenomenal. But again, it's hard for me to take too big a step forward because, again, it's classic Iowa, which is good, but it's like, when Iowa loses, we're all clamoring for the pass offense to be better, But when they win a game like this, there's so many people that forget about the fact that we clamor for that. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I expect the pass game to get better, and it has in small doses, but it hasn't taken the big step forward that I would have hoped to see by now. It still is, it's more efficient. The ease is a little bit better, but the explosiveness, the big chunk plays, the, being able to lean on the passing game for a game here or there, it's not quite there yet. So looking forward, so that's kind of my thoughts. Good win. Wisconsin's not the best. Some positives, but still some things. As I've said, this is not what we judge Iowa on. What I'm judging Iowa on is their performances against the Penn State, which I'll get to in a moment. The Michigans, the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Indianas, the top 25 tier programs where Iowa has a huge opportunity to show how much they've improved and surge into the top 25 and stake their claim. That is when we can really truly judge the Iowa Hawkeyes. Now, as for Penn State, turning to Penn State for next week, Penn State not looking as good as people thought. That's why I always say you cannot judge and predict what a team is going to finish based on the schedule before the season. That's why I always say I base it off of the talent that is on the roster. For me, it's 80% talent on the roster, 20% looking at the schedule. For most people, though, it's 80% looking at the schedule, 20% looking at the talent on the roster. That ain't me. And they just lost to Northwestern after losing the previous week. I think they lost to UCLA. Again, this game is looking a lot more winnable, especially considering Drew Aller is out with a season-ending injury. I wish him well. It sucks that he got injured. I would like Iowa to beat Penn State when they're at full strength. But still, it is what it is. You can only play what's right in front of you. So this is a big opportunity for Iowa to take advantage of this gift and a game that people were looking at almost certainly as a loss, turning it into a win, and kind of for better or for worse, making even on the loss to Indiana. Because the way people were looking at Iowa's schedule, it's like, okay, Indiana, Penn State. If we can win one there, we're good. Well, they lost to Indiana, and that a lot of people thought was going to be the more winnable game. Now it's actually Penn State. So, they can make even on that. So, but anyways, guys, good win. Glad to see Iowa moving forward. And get back on track. Thank you guys so much for listening. Like I said, sorry I wasn't able to do this, being able to share the screen. But I can only work with what I got going on. Sometimes, internet is what it is. Thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, like, comment. You guys know the drill. We have another late night game, this time at home next week against Penn State. I'll have you guys covered on the game preview probably tomorrow. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. In fact, our feelings, because your feelings just matter. I love you, Hawk fans. Hawks win 37-0. Claim the Heartland Trophy against the Wisconsin Badgers. I'll see you next time. Go Hawks. Bye-bye.